Hey guys, Josh McQueen here. For today's assignment, I searched the Jerry Falwell Library database for the letters O and P and located the Oxford Scholarship Online database and the Project Muse database to find sources for my George Washington research project. The first source that I came across was, I found it on the Oxford Scholarship Online database, and it was a book entitled Faith and the Presidency from George Washington to George W. Bush by Gary Scott Smith. This book examined 11 different presidents, starting with George Washington and ending with George Bush, to see how these presidents were shaped by their religious views and values towards policies. Smith specifically is asking two major questions in this work that may tie into my research on Washington. The questions are, how have their worldviews, blueprints for understanding, explaining, and managing reality, influenced presidential thoughts and actions? And what factors, including religious training, biblical study, and spiritual nurture, have shaped the character of these presidents? Obviously, for the 11 presidents, it sounds like a really interesting book, but my focus is on Washington, so I pretty much only be using those segments. The next book that I found on the Oxford Scholarship Online database was entitled George Washington and the Art of Business: The Leadership Principles of America's First Commander-in-Chief. This book was written by Mark McNeely, and it examined George Washington's character traits and leadership skills. I don't think this book would really be part of my main scholarship on the topic, since it focuses a lot on how these leadership principles can be tied into business, but there are definitely some background ideas that may prove to be useful depending on how I kind of form the paper. Now, on the Project Muse database, I also found some sources. I found an article entitled George Washington and the Quakers by Paul F. Bowler Jr. This article specifically focuses on Washington's interactions with religious groups, specifically with the Quakers, and Bowler's examining Washington's attitudes towards these groups and how they kind of progressed over time. Specifically, the Quakers are a great example because Bowler argues that Washington saw Quakers in a more negative light during the Revolutionary War. At the time, it was kind of against their religion to get involved, so they were refusing to join the fight for freedom. So at the time, Washington saw them in a more negative light, but later on, Washington learns that these pacifists could be admirable examples for good citizens in society. So this article is useful because it shows a perspective of Washington's, compartmentalization. In different roles, Washington was able to see the benefits of different groups and understand the importance of religious toleration overall and how that kind of shaped American society. My fourth source, which I found as well on the Project Muse database, was an article entitled George Washington and the Founding of Democracy. In this article, Seymour Martin Lipset attempts to re-examine Washington. Lipset believes that American figures, major ones like Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Ben Franklin, they've been seen as real people, but Washington's been more depicted as like a painting on a wall. He's more of like a figure, but Lipset wants to reframe Washington and make him sort of the linchpin for the establishment of the American Democratic Republic. Lipset, throughout his short article, breaks down major ideas like how the new government needed legitimacy. And he's trying to show that Washington played this critical role, if not the most critical role, in the establishment and the survival of the young republic. Overall, the Oxford Scholarship database and the Project Muse database both seem like useful sites to find sources. Before this class, I'd never really used these two databases before. The previous assignment that focused on JSTOR was right up my alley. I love JSTOR. That's pretty much what I have always used. And so these two databases were new for me. It was interesting to kind of see them, work through them. But I feel now that I've used them, I may be beginning to utilize them more. I'll probably stick to JSTOR for my initial research for secondary sources, but I could definitely see myself finding more resources on these databases because of what they've kind of expanded, the different access that I can find on them. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.